Witam na kanale Marek, Meram. 966. The christening of the first well-known ruler of Poland, Mieszko I. But the history of Slavic peoples spans hundreds and probably thousands of years farther back into the past, before Mieszko I. 1410. Kingdom of Poland, aided by Lithuania, deal a crushing defeat to the all-powerful, cruel and ruthless Teutonic Order, which before was said to be invincible. The 15th century. Poles, for the first time in history, bring in a law that you cannot be imprisoned without a trial. This rule is the foundation of the modern democracy. English people will do that more than 200 years later, French people more than 350 years later. The 15th century still, Catholic Polish people advocate tolerance towards pagans, for example that pagans cannot be attacked in order to convert them to Christianity. The 15th century again, with a parliament, Poland becomes the first true democracy in the world. Earlier in France, the so-called parliament was actually a royal court and not a true parliament. 1543. Polish astronomer Copernicus starts a worldwide scientific revolution. It's the Earth that goes around the Sun, not the other way round. 1573. Poles create the first true constitution in the world. Earlier, the English Great Charter was only a loose handful of rights, not a true constitution. The 16th century. Poland, with its culture focused on freedom, tolerance and development, is a major European center of culture. It becomes an oasis of tolerance, also for Jews, in Europe torn by bloody religious conflicts. The vast Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, including the present-day Ukraine area, is the greatest power in Europe. The Polish hussars are an unstoppable force on the continent, crushing armies that are many times larger. In 1610, Polish troops conquer Moscow, and the Polish military chief rules there for 2 years, the only time in the whole history that it happened. Even Napoleon left Moscow quickly. Nobody else conquered the city, nor even the Third Reich. But hard times are to come. Mid-17th century. The so-called Swedish deluge leaves Poland in destruction, with almost half of the inhabitants dead. A lot of Polish cultural property, stolen, has been kept in Sweden to this very day, to the present day. 1683. In the Battle of Vienna, with amazing bravado, Poles completely defeat the Turkish Ottoman Empire, saving the city of Vienna, the whole Austrian Empire and, by consequence, the whole Western world. Around the end of the 17th century, for political reasons, European powers start to picture Poland as a country that is backward and generally condemnable. This propaganda has persisted to the present day. End of the 18th century. For decades blown apart from inside by cunning and fraudulent foreign agents, deadly weakened by many wars waged by strangers on its home ground, Poland succumbs to 3 stages of partition and disappears from maps. The tolerance of Polish people turns on themselves, turns against themselves, bringing about lack of discipline and resulting in inability to eliminate traitors and foreign agents. But above all, Polish people value freedom. They remain loyal to the high virtues they hold in their hearts. In spite of repressions by Tsarist Russia, in spite of anti-Polish policy of Prussia and later Germany. 1918, at the end of World War I, after 123 years of bondage, Poland regains independence. Polish people achieve what cannot be achieved. They very quickly build their state from scratch, creating a country that is amazingly ambitious in terms of science and progress. 1920. In the Battle of Warsaw, Polish people stopped the barbaric, cruel Red Army of Bolsheviks, once more saving Western Europe from a fate worse than death. September 1st, 1939, Germany attacks Poland and World War II breaks out. From the very start, Poles are mass murdered by Nazi Germany. Hundreds of thousands of deaths, eventually millions in total. Up to 1941, their situation is much worse than the situation of Jews. Germans built death and concentration camps in the former Poland, now a slave, a province of Germany. Poles are the first victims in such camps. Then the Jewish Holocaust starts. Despite cruel German law forbidding Poles from helping Jews, Poles risk their lives doing so. You are to be killed if you as a Pole have helped a Jew in any way. You and your family, often even whole houses or villages, are to be killed, shot dead for that, on the spot, immediately. Can you imagine? Taking that into consideration, millions of Poles were engaged in helping Jews. Poland was the only country under German occupation where such cruel laws were enforced. Why? Because Poles were helping Jews on a mass scale. Today Poles have the highest number of the Yad Vashem, the righteous among the nations, titles in the world, and many more are pending, have been blocked. During the Second World War, Polish exile government established the Żegota Council, the only organization which helped Jews in Europe occupied by Germans. You can read that even in the Wikipedia. And one more thing, a Jewish humanitarian activist, Shmuel Zygielboim, wrote in his book in 1942, so 3 years into World War II. Here I have to notice that Polish people give to Jews all possible help and compassion. Poland enters the Second World War misled by security guarantees issued by British and French governments. Nevertheless, Poles put up a heroic fight. One example is the defense of Wisna bunkers, where Poles are impossibly outnumbered, 117 to 1, but for an amazingly long time hold off more than 3 German divisions, including a powerful and deadly armored division. Poles continue to fight for freedom on every front of the Second World War, including fearless Polish pilots in the aerial Battle of Britain with Polish No. 303 Squadron, the best squadron in the whole Battle of Britain, including cracking Enigma, the famous German cipher machine, including General Matejko's Polish 1st Armored Division, the so-called Black Devils, which at the end of World War II liberates hundreds of localities in France, Belgium and the Netherlands, famous for its efficiency, humanity and goodwill, and enthusiastically welcome by the locals who thank Poles wholeheartedly. Today they still remember General Matejko. Back to Poland occupied by Germans and Soviets during World War II. Germans take the western half of Poland, but the Soviet Union under Stalin takes the eastern one. Here unheard of atrocities happen. Stalin wants Poles to be reduced to meek and weak slaves, just like Germans do, but operates in an even more cruel, sadistic way. Throughout former Poland, Poles create a complete underground state with a huge secret army, much larger than all other underground movements in occupied Europe combined, including the French resistance. This way it is easier for them to keep the faith, to stay sane in the face of a tragic situation. For Poles it is the following: every day the death of relatives and neighbors, tortures, public executions in the streets, deportations to German concentration camps. Leaving home, only taking a few steps on the sidewalk, could mean never seeing your family again, with German łapanki in the streets and sending to concentration camps. While under Stalin, they often come for you even in the middle of the night, and then endlessly torture you. If you are so-called lucky, you survive and are sent to slowly die in labor camps in the cold as hell Siberia. So, staying human, resisting inhuman treatment, came at a huge cost for Polish people. Let's remember those heroic fighters for freedom, always against tyrants. In comparison, German occupation in Western Europe was actually more like not giving dessert to an unruly child. Both occupiers, Germany and the Soviet Union, are atrocious, but surprisingly, it is from a third side that the most cruel genocide is committed on Poles. It happens in the former Eastern Poland. During the whole World War II and up to 1947, nationalist Ukrainians murder much more than 100,000 Poles just for being Poles. Nobody knows exactly just how many, because too many villages are completely erased from the face of the earth, burnt down, and all the inhabitants slaughtered. In such cases no one survived to tell the tale. The number of victims is maybe even 300,000. They are slayed in unimaginable ways, in the ways you don't want to know. People pray to be killed by a gunshot in order to avoid death in extreme suffering. Nationalist Ukrainians invent about as many ways of torturing to death as there are days in the year. Just to give some vague idea, those ways include burning alive children wrapped in straw, plucking out the eyes and tongues of newborns, flaying, ripping stomach with a knife and pouring inside boiling water. This is beyond anything that can be imagined by humans. Today Ukraine denies those facts. This is probably the most atrocious, wild, inhuman carnage of all time, surpassing even antiquity and Middle Ages, surpassing Genghis Khan, because ethnic cleansings did take place in the past. They served some political purpose, albeit a sick one, but in this case it is mainly about sadistic extreme torturing. Worse than anything you can watch in horrors. Worse than that special Japanese unit 731 at more or less the same time who committed unbelievable crimes in northeastern China, because in that case there was some semblance of medical experiments, while in eastern Poland there was only bloodthirsty, wild slaughter against all European civilized standards, committed by quote-unquote regular people. After World War II, Poland is given to Stalin as a prize for helping the Western Allies. The end of the war is not the end of terror for Poles, only the tormentor changes. Tortures in prisons and destroying the nation go on for years. Poland is turned into a slave as a communist satellite of the Soviet Union. Today Poland is the only country to which Germany did not pay compensation for the Second World War. Poland, the most destroyed country in World War II, with millions of people murdered in German concentration camps. Ironically, up to this very day, Germany has been profiting from countless works of art stolen in the occupied Poland, not to mention gold, numerous old books, and so on. 1956, 1970, 1980. In acts of amazing bravery, Poles strike and clash with communist police and even army in attempts to free themselves from communist bondage. 1980, the 10 million people Solidarność movement unites Poles in a fight against communism, but it's ended with a martial law introduced on the 13th of December 1981 by a grim and grotesque communist leader. 1989, the round table negotiations between communist power and opposition, the symbol of peaceful revolution and the end of inhuman communism. Poland seems to be free at last. But the freedom that we had so much wanted in the past turned out to be only the freedom to buy sub-quality products from Western companies which want to make a fortune in Poland and all Central Europe by overpricing mediocre stuff they sell to nations they consider inferior. 2004, Poland joins the European Union. 2022, after Russian attack on Ukraine, Poland takes millions upon millions of Ukrainians fleeing from war, many times more than all other countries combined. Have you heard about that? You may have heard of Hungary, Romania, Germany, but not especially Poland. Once more, the role of Poland gets downgraded and altogether erased. What is more, in an act of unprecedented kindness, charity, Christian love of neighbor, Poles take into their homes as guests probably the children and grandchildren of those Ukrainians who slaughtered hundreds of thousands of Poles in the most horrific, inhuman, sickest ways at the time of World War II, which I was talking about earlier. Unbelievable. I am proud to be Polish, a son of this kind nation of heroes.